Hi, Sheila here with Creative Aging. We are going to do some more watercolor, and today we're going to practice cityscapes. So if you haven't seen any of the other watercolor painting techniques, you may want to check out those videos. You can definitely do this today without seeing them, but we did some basic washes and some sunsets, and just helps with a little brush technique if you've never done watercolor before. And so that's going to be on the additional links in the YouTube channel with the Arts Council of Oklahoma City. So obviously we've got quite a few different cityscapes. Some of them are actual cities, some of these are made up. We're just practicing drawing and how to use a small brush with a lot of control. And also going to be thinking about perspective. So the further away things get, the more faded they're going to look. It's called atmospheric perspective. And so in any kind of landscapes, the things in the foreground are going to look darker and closer. And the more, further they get away, it's going to be kind of faded. Even if you go and look at a sunset or go to the lake, you're going to start noticing atmospheric perspective. And so let me show you a few more. And these are all easy. And I did not use a ruler. Now you can, of course, use a ruler. Totally up to you. Some people feel very comfortable using rulers. They don't like not using rulers. That's what I'm saying. I like to eyeball things. And because of watercolor painting, sometimes it's hard to keep the straight line. And so I don't want people to use a ruler and feel like they have to paint perfectly straight as well. So it's just kind of whatever your comfort level is. Please use whatever you feel is more natural to you. Okay, so we're gonna start one, and then at the end of the video we'll come back so you can kind of see exactly how I did each one of these in a different way. And obviously these are not realistic. I mean, that's just a lot of dots and stripes and crisscrosses, and just to add a little bit of interest so the buildings don't look totally flat. You don't want to paint everything completely flat. So they are easier than they look. I don't want anybody to feel intimidated. Oh, and I missed one. Sorry about this. Here's another one. Some London. People like London. And it's nice. Cities are a little easier if they have an obvious building like Big Ben, the London Eye. Most people would automatically know this is London. And then of course the little, most people would know that's San Francisco. So if you've lived somewhere or you had a favorite vacation, maybe look at pictures online and figure out what you want to do. If you do a Google search of line drawings, that actually might be really helpful to you. So that's what I did with this one. I went ahead and got it started. So I just looked up New York City line drawing, and I just found a basic line drawing just to get the shape of my buildings. So I just kind of drew a horizon line, which obviously you do not have to have a horizon line. Like this one, I started at the bottom because I wanted it to look like the buildings were really close up. So it depends on the look, what you want to do. If you want to look like you're in the middle, like looking up at these buildings, then maybe you don't want a horizon line. But if you want them to be a little further away, like you're seeing them in a distance, you might want to draw a horizon line. So that's how you start. And draw light, as always with watercolor. And hopefully you can see this. I draw really light. So I started with my horizon line. And then I just took some of the buildings from New York City and I just drew basic squares. And I did not use a ruler. You can tell they're not perfect. And that's okay. Honestly, it's probably more interesting by the end if they're not all perfect. And you can erase. I obviously erased a lot to get these shapes. And you want to overlap. So make sure to have one building behind one another. So I just started with a square on one end, and then a square, and then kind of layered some shapes on top. Okay, so all of these shapes are easy. Everybody can do this. Just do one shape at a time. And if you want to completely make up a city like this one, just do a few shapes. Do some triangles. Do some squares. Layer your buildings. This is a fun little fantasy project where you can do whatever you want, and honestly, people are probably going to see it and they're going to try to guess where it is anyway, so it's kind of fun to just make up your own shapes. But make sure to have some behind each other. And so when you're drawing, you know, I drew this, and then I drew the line all the way down, and then I erased it. So if you're, you know, so then just draw your square, and you might want to go all the way down, and then you can figure out where your next building's going to be, and then just erase the other line. So once you get your drawing done, you can start painting. And I recommend a couple sizes of brushes. Definitely need a small point. The point brushes are going to be the easiest. So try to find a brush in your collection that has a good point. You can work with something like this, but it's a little bit harder if you get some details. So like the top of this building, it is going to be so hard to use this brush. But certain buildings you can use, you know, this brush with. So it's up to you, but have more out just so you have a good collection and you can practice with each one. You might find that you like certain brushes. Some people really like the flat edge. They'd rather use just a flat edge brush. A lot of people like to have the point because it's more like a pencil. And if you want to do a background for a sky, you're going to want a big brush too. So have a good collection of brushes. Have your water cups ready. And obviously your watercolor paints. I'll go ahead and put a few of these behind so you can kind of look. And obviously if you want to, you know, try some different shapes, this is the same technique. Started with a building up front and then just layer buildings behind. Okay, so you don't have to do lots of squares. If you're a little more advanced, you might want to try something different just to play with perspective a little bit more. It just depends on your level. I don't want anyone to be intimidated, but I also don't want anyone to be bored. So this is good practice for everybody. Okay, so I'm going to start with the medium brush. And remember, I'm going to do the buildings in the front a little bit darker. So say I want to, now of course you can do any colors you want on these. You can do a monochromatic, which means all the same shades, which I think I'm going to do that. So I'm going to do some purples and make dark purples in the front and then kind of have them faded in the back. So it's all going to be in the same color scheme. Now with purple, can get dark really fast. So make sure to wet your paint. So I like to just get water in it so that it's obviously not too dark right away. And if you have an extra piece of paper you want to blot, or if you want to use a paper towel, you can see how dark your paint is going to be. So you can always test it before you put it on the paper. And so with the you just kind of go in with your shape, slow and controlled, kind of like drawing. And just start filling them in. Now I'm going to just do base colors for right now because later I can always add some windows and some little cross hatching and some more texture. But I want to just get the kind of the background on these now, and then I'll let them dry. And then then we can do the other details after they're dry. So let's use a dark purple on another building that's kind of in the front. So this one, I'm even gonna make that one darker. So I'm gonna use less water. So that's really dark. There's not much water, it's a lot of paint. We've been doing a lot of projects with watercolor where we're using a lot more water, which is good because that's kind of the point of watercolors. You want the water to move and create, you know, new things. You know, if you're going to do it this dark, you might as well use acrylic. But for this project, it's good. I think it's good to practice both ways because we're going to use a lot more water in the back. So this project is going to help you have more control over exactly how much water you're using and how to tell the difference. And then this building, I'm going to have that be a dark purple as well. But not quite as dark as what I just did, so I'm adding more water. And I'm even going to switch to this shade of purple. It's got a little blue in it. I think it'll give it a little bit more color, but I'm going to stay in the same, you know, same color family. And just keep filling in your buildings. Get your background done. There's no rush. So obviously take your time and figure out, you might want to do more blotting than I do just so you get a real feel of exactly how much paint and how much water you want to use for each building. One good thing though is if you do get it too dark, you can always blot it with a paper towel. And if you get it too light, you can always let it dry and add a little more color. So this should not be stressful. I'll use that same color right here. And later I'm going to separate these a little bit more, either with a pencil or a Sharpie, like a ultra fine point Sharpie. So some of the details I'm going to bring back out with pencils. So right now, it's going to look weird. A lot of times painting while it's in progress can look strange, but that's just because it's just like priming your walls. You kind of have to get the base coat down, and then we're going to keep adding layers of detail, and it's going to come together. So don't get frustrated. Some people get frustrated really early on, and they think that they're going to have like some masterpiece within 10 minutes, but it doesn't work like that, especially if you're not used to painting. You really have to take time, and our projects usually come together within an hour and a half. Like, we try to plan our projects so it should take you an hour and a half to complete this. So please don't get frustrated in the first 30 minutes. Okay, so I have the kind of the basic color background on all the buildings. So I just kept going with using a variation of dark purple and this kind of a blue purple, and then I used a little bit of this one, which is very similar. And I pretty much used mostly this dark purple and this blue purple, and I used more or less water. So you can kind of see what I did. And so I wanted, certain buildings to look really far away. And I didn't like the negative space on the end, so I ended up adding like extra shapes. So if you look online at a city that you like, the skyline, you can add buildings depending on your composition or what you think looks good. This can be made up. I don't want you to feel like it has to look exactly like another city. So, please feel free if you want to keep going and play with perspective, maybe add more buildings very far in the distance. That's what I did with this one. So a lot of those buildings back there were made up. Just kept going with shapes and just playing with how much water I was using. And so these, when you get this light, that's almost painting with all water and just a little bit of a dirty brush. That is definitely no color. So I'm just using the brush that I used on the other buildings and getting more water on it. And it's just like a little bit of a dirty brush that gives it a very faint, very faint color. But that makes it look further away. So now I've let it dry enough to where we can maybe do some textures on top. So let me move this stuff out of the way. Okay, so let's continue. I'm even going to use a smaller brush. So I've been using kind of a medium point. Going to switch to a small. With this size brush, because it is so small, it doesn't hold a lot of water or a lot of paint. It's actually a good thing because then it forces you to really think about what you're doing, and you have to dip it in color each time. So using a tiny brush can kind of help you be more patient. And this, kind of like, think of it as doodling. This is not going to be realistic. But you can do, whatever you want to kind of texture these buildings. And so say I want to use a little bit more the dark purple. Maybe I want to go in and let's do this building. Let's just add some lines. Sorry, you can't see what I'm doing. Let's try to move that. Okay. And maybe I'll use a little bit more dark up here. In this point, maybe just a couple. And I want to make it darker right here so you can tell that these are separate pieces. So there's no right or wrong way to do this. I mean, that is just adding stripes, but it already looks better. Okay, and then I'll add more dark at the top of this building. I'm going to drag that down because that got really dark, and so I'm going to add a little more water and blend it into the building shape because that got too dark and I don't want it to be that dark. So I'm just going to drag the color I already have down and using water just to give it a little bit of a fade into the rest of the building. This is very sad. Sad looking building right there. But I drew, so we're gonna add more color to this one and we've gotta do that point. So I'm gonna add more color. I'm gonna use the different shade of purple too. And this small brush will help with that. So I'm using a lot of water. I don't wanna completely cover up all that I've done. I just want a little bit of extra color. And remember, watercolor dries a little bit lighter. So whenever you paint, if it's still wet, it's just gonna fade a little bit more. Let's do this point. I'm gonna turn it so I'm kind of painting crooked right now. So for this little point though, I need to do it right side up. There we go. So you're gonna learn how to control this brush by this project. You kind of really have to just use the point of the end of the brush. Pretend like it's an old-fashioned ink pen. And just be slow. And if your hands will not allow you to do that detailed of a work, then you're going to use your pencil or an ink pen. Let me show you. On these, it's pencil. So it's tiny details. I know some people cannot keep their hands still for that detail of work. So you definitely can use a fine point Sharpie. See how that one? You can tell it's a little darker. That's actually an ultra fine point Sharpie. So we have options, but you might as well try, and if you can't do it, blot it away. So that one, I'm gonna use my pencil on this one just to show you. So that one, let's and if you just draw with your pencil light, it can look like gray paint. See, it doesn't really look like pencil the way that we're going to use it. And if you want to do some design on your buildings with pencil, that can also look interesting. Just make sure it's dry. You can touch it. This, obviously, the one I just did isn't dry, so I'm going to be careful with my hand, but you can also do some drawing after it's done. So I'm just going to be light, just little bitty details. Little details matter. And let's draw lines going down. Okay, it's coming together. I'm going to continue. I'm going to do something to every building. I'm going to keep adding details and texture and try to get this to come together. Okay, so I kept adding. I tried to keep it really simple, and I just added a lot of small little dots and stripes. So it's subtle. Like right there was kind of a medium purple, and I just went in with dark purple and added stripes downward. There I added kind of crisscross stripes. Okay, and then just dots all the way across, and then a line in between those dots. So you can think of this part of it as kind of doodling. Remember, this doesn't have to be realistic, but we want to add texture, otherwise it's boring and flat, and this is just good practice and hopefully fun. So it's coming together, and I can now maybe go in with my pencil and add a few more details just to bring out the shape of the buildings. I'm gonna add some pencil right here. I think I want a little bit more in here. So I'll just add some lines. I'm going to add a line right here to darken one edge of this point. So think of how buildings are going to be shadowed, so you might want to have one side darker. So I also added that. I just added a little darker edge. So think about your buildings when they're shadowed. It's hard to see, but see what the pencil did? It's very subtle, but all of these subtle details is what is going to make it look good. So think of anything with art, it's layers. So you start with just a base color, and then you're adding layers and layers of paint and detail. And I think you're gonna like using the pencil after your paint is dried, because it's once you have all the paint down, then you can really add some cool little windows and details. And you don't want to do it too hard, but so right there, I'll just add some squares. Go all the way down. So with your paint, you're not going to get it exact. So see those dots? Not exact, but you can get more exact with your pencil. So it looks good, and you really can't tell it's pencil. So I don't often use pencil with my watercolor paint, but I think this project's a good one to mix the two together. I think it looks really, really interesting. And so I'll add some pencil about on this edge over here, just a little bit more. I'm not going to do it to the other side. And then you can decide what you want to do. If you want to leave it white down here, like once you love your painting, you can leave it white. You can do something like this, where it's just a little bit of blue. So that is very easy. Get your flat brush. And that's this green. Get a lot of water. I didn't even paint the whole thing, but you know why I did this? Because you can cover up all the mistakes, and when you went too far below your line, see, like here, I can cover up anything. Anytime I brush slipped or I went down too far, you can cover it up with that. So you don't even have to paint all the water. You just want a little bit of color down there. This is, of course, optional. And you could paint the whole thing, or you could just paint a little bit. Up to you. So I did have that video of doing water, so just kind of see how I'm going back and forth. So this would be the Hudson River, since my scene's in New York City. Okay. So that gives you an idea. Let's go back, and I want to show you some of the other ones up close. So this is on the half sheet of watercolor paper as well. Just doing, you know, this was a little bit different shapes, but overlapping. This has a lot more overlapping. Buildings behind, buildings in front. A lot of these, this one's made up, of course, and a lot of these shapes I added at the end. And this has all color, a lot of different colors, but I still made sure to get ones in the distance that looked further away. See how light that is? So you want to have a few with more water that look in the distance. And this has a lot of cross-hatching. So just crisscrossing with your lines. This is just stripes up and down and sideways. And then dots. And this is another monochromatic one. So it's all using shades of purple. That has some black in it. Hopefully now you can kind of see exactly how I did my brush strokes. And this one has a lot of pencil detail in it too. And here's one with a bridge. If you want to try a bridge, do the bridge last. So maybe, you know, this one, see the horizon line is also at an angle. So if you're more maybe an advanced student, you might want to try something like this and just do an angle for your horizon line. And then the same technique, draw your buildings one after another, overlapping front and back. And this, you know, just a little round building. And then I added the bridge. But look, these bridges are done exactly like the buildings. So it's just kind of a square on top of a square. These are all very easy shapes. It's all very geometrical. And same technique on the building. A lot of cross-hatching and a lot of dots with your paintbrush. And instead of the water, I did a very light wash in the background. So it's just using a lot of water and very little paint, just moving your brush around. I'll add some more. So see? So if you want to do a sky, just do a light wash. And you don't even have to do all of it. See, I didn't even get close to the buildings down there because I didn't want it to bleed into each other. It just gives you the illusion that there's a little bit of sky. This one was done the same way. Just a little bit of water. And I did it I wanted it to look like a sunset, so I just did blue and purple, but I didn't do a sky. And you can see the pencil mark in this building. Hopefully you can see that. I'll even add a little more right now. So let's do a pencil mark in the Big Ben. Just a little bit. I'm going to do some up here too. Exaggerate that point, make it taller. I love the pencil mark on the black paint. I think that looks really good always. So I'm just doing the same motions, like cross-hatching, and I'm just going over the paint just to get a little bit more texture, and I'm going to get these points a little bit better off. Okay. So that's just very little pencil. Makes a big difference. All of these images will be attached right under this video. So if you want to look at these up close and draw from anything I have, any of my examples, or you are welcome to just Google cityscape. You can do, I like to Google, like if you want to do Chicago line drawing. And then that way you'll only see Chicago line drawings and it's easier to draw from that. If you want to draw from an actual photograph, that's fine too, but that's a lot of details to sort out if you're not used to drawing and painting. So it just depends on your level. So yeah, if you want to just, like I did San Francisco line drawings, and I looked at one and I drew from that. And then I just painted it. So this one's a little bit different, but you know, if it's up to you. I want you to play and draw something that you think would be fun. Anyways, hope you enjoy. I will see you next time.